We're now at verse 10 of chapter 2 in our study of Titus. This verse reads, "Not pilfering, but showing all good faith, so that they will adorn the doctrine of God our Savior in every respect." This word pilfering is kind of interesting. It just means to hold back for yourself. It has this implied sort of selfishness to it. It's a kind of skimming off the top, if you will. And here Paul is telling Titus that the bond slaves do not need to be doing this. They don't need to be argumentative. They don't need to be scamming their masters, but instead they need to do everything demonstrating a good faith. Now, we've gone through quite a few verses in the book, and you'll recall that the problem with the teachings of the Judaizers, or the opponents, is that they teach a works-based salvation. And Paul's concern is their pollution of the purity of the apostolic teaching, which is that salvation comes through faith. And there's a tendency to look at this and say something like, well, Paul sure is making a big deal about outward appearances and good deeds and works to be preaching about salvation by faith alone. But I think what the second part of this verse shows us is that salvation is not the question here. And that's very important to realize so that we don't end up confusing Paul's teachings with the teachings of the Judaizers. Here, Paul doesn't tell Titus that the people in the churches on Crete need to do these things in order to be saved. Instead, he says that they should be behaving this way in order to preserve the purity of the apostolic teachings regarding God. See, the Judaizers are not arguing on the basis of faith, they're arguing on the basis of works. And Paul's point here is not do these works so you can be saved, it's be so good at being committed to your faith that when the opponents do attack you, they can't even attack you on the basis of your works because your works are pure. We see Paul using the same rationale in verse 8, where he says, so that the opponent will be put to shame, having nothing bad to say about us. In other words, when the Judaizers attempt to attack your character on the basis of works, you don't even have to argue with them because they're going to end up looking foolish by attacking an upstanding person who believes in the apostolic teaching. It's a small nuance, but it's an important one, and I think in reiterating that here in verse 10, Paul makes it pretty clear what he means. So that's it for this verse, and we'll pick it up with verse 11.